All right, hello once again, Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College. We've been going over starting to write some programs for our Java text, Tony Gaddis 5th edition Java Early Objects. And we've done work we did an intro program, which was a Hello World. We did a Chapter 1, a Chapter 2, and a Chapter 4 program. So now I'm going to come in and do a Chapter 3 program. So I'm going to start fresh. So I'm going to say Chapter 03-Payroll. Now earlier I had started to create this, and I copied a bunch of stuff over, but it's so different that I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to put in here a new class, and as always we will call it payroll. I will not have a main. This will be the first time that we're going to actually have two different files in our program, which is in some ways at least more symbolic of the way typically programs run. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, there it is. Alright, so I'm going to grab the comment, just the comment, but I'll keep that one open in case I want to look at it again later. So this will be a third payroll program, and it will demonstrate, among other things, the use of classes, getters, setters, and a constructor from Chapter 3 of our Gaddis Java textbook. Okay, so that's the start. And the reason that I'm not going to put a main in here is that this file will be a class file only. There won't be anything else in it. So the first thing I want to do is I want to create some constants. So I want to create some class constants. So every time I create a member of this class, it'll have access to these constants. So private, static, final, double, and we're going to have about 5 of these. So I'm just going to copy this 5 times. The first two will be the ones that we've been working with, and that is max non-OT, and we will set that equal to 40, and that's the most hours employee can work with no overtime. So again, that's the first one. Then we'll have OT rate, and we'll set that equal to 1.5. And again, that's our overtime rate, which, as we mentioned, was time and 1/2. All right, now we're going to introduce some new ones here. First one, we're going to work with hours and rate. We're going to call it min hours. So that's the maximum number of hours an employee can, the minimum number of hours an employee can work. Okay, and we're going to set it to 0. So why would 0 be the minimum number of hours? Well, it should make sense. The employee could be sick, the employee could be on vacation, there could be other reasons. So minimum number of hours employee can work. All right, I'm just going to grab this whole thing here. And this will become max hours. And we're going to set max hours equal to 84. And that number was somewhat, but not totally arbitrary. And what I mean by that is I set that up so that the most hours you can work in a week are 84, thinking that you'd work no more than 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. All right, I guess I skipped one from here. So we'll copy that over in just a second. So why didn't these change colors? Min hours equals 0.0. I'm not sure, but I think they will. All right, min rate. That will also be equal to 0.0. And we'll call that the minimum per hour pay rate for an employee. That's fine. Doesn't seem to like that, so we'll break that into 2. And we'll copy this down, and we'll have a max rate. And I just, again, came up with an arbitrary number, which I said was going to be 100. So that's the most that an employee can make. Okay? So I've got 6 class constants. Max non-OT, which we had before, the most number of hours an employee can work without getting any overtime. Then I had 1.5, which was the overtime rate. 0, which was the least amount of money an employee could get paid. 84, which was the 0, which was the minimum number of hours you could work for min hours. 84, which was the maximum number of hours you could work for max hours. And min rate, which was 0, and max rate, which was 100. All right, now I want to create, and I'm going to give this a special word here. In fact, I'm going to tab each one of these over one more time. Tabbing does not help anything but aesthetics. It might make it easier for you to see what's going on. So I'm going to put here, create class variables. And if you don't know what that is, we're going to look at it in just a minute. Private string first name, and I'm not going to initialize any of these. Private string last name. Private double hours. Private double rate. Private double gross. All right, so those are the same class variables that we've had. In fact, those aren't class variables. Those are instance variables. So each time that we come in here and we create a new employee, that new employee will have a first name. That employee will have a last name. That employee will have an hours worked. That employee will have a pay rate. And that employee will have a gross pay. And that gross pay, as we have been saying, will be hours times rate. And we will include overtime, but I'll get to that in just a minute. So every time we create a new instance of a class, each instance will have those variables. All right? So we will also have what are called some class variables. And they will both be protected. So I'm going to have a protected static int count. And I'm going to set that just once equal to 0. And that's going to be an employee counter. So it's going to show us how many employees we're currently working with. And we'll have a protected static double. And we're going to call that tot gross, which will also set equal to 0. And that will be the total gross pay of all employees. All right, let me move this over. I'm a little anal about this if you haven't figured that out already. All right, it's looking good so far, as far as I can tell. All right, now I'm going to put something in here that we haven't had before, and that is, let me hit enter a few times here. That is, I'm going to put in a constructor. You may or may not remember, if you've watched the lectures, a constructor is what happens when you create a new employee. This is what gets called. For now, we're only going to have one constructor. So I'm going to put in here public payroll, and we can pass in a string with the first name, a string with the last name, a double with the hours, and a double with the rate. Now, I could have called these exactly what we called them previously. I could have called them first name, last name, hours, and rate. Then I would have to say this dot first name equal first name, this dot last name equal last name, etc. And I'm still going to use the this, even though I don't have to. This dot first name equals F. This dot last name equals L. This dot hours equal H. This dot rate equals R, and this dot gross equals G. And I left that out, so I'll have to add that. So double G. All right. So what this is going to do, this will initialize each payroll object to the values that we pass into said object. All right. Values wrong. There we go. All right. Now, as of right now, we're not putting in any kind of validity checking in here. We're not doing any validity checking. So let's add some of that. So I like to kind of mark stuff out here. So I'm going to put this here so I know pretty much where my constructor starts and where my constructor ends. You don't have to do this. So there's the beginning and the ending of my constructor. And now I'm going to put in here, I'm going to add what are called some getters and setters. Now there's different ways that I can do this. One way that I can do this is I can go to, is it refactor? It's source. Generate getters and setters. So I want it to generate setters and getters for first name, for last name, for hours, and for rate. I don't want one for gross. So I want them all to be public, and I'm going to click OK, and boom. They were all created for me. All right. I am going to partition off each one of them. We still have, for lack of better words, a problem with this code. And the problem that we have with this code is the fact that currently, the way that it currently exists, we're not doing any error checking at all in here. So if we happen to pass in garbage values, they're going to be passed into the program. So we're going to check that. Now these get routines, all that's doing is returning a value. So they're fine the way they are. So all these gets are going to be okay. right? It's the sets that we're going to have the issue with. Because what we want to make sure of in these set routines is we want to make sure that the value that was passed in to each one of these variables was a valid value. So instead of just saying this dot first name equals first name, what I'm going to do is I'm going to check, and I'm going to say this dot first name equals, and I'm going to put a check in here, and I'm going to say if first name is not equal to null, meaning if I put something in there, then we're going to set it equal to the first name. Now remember, I can't do that. I can't say not equal null. I got to say dot if not first name dot equals null. Just really having problems again with the keyboard on this machine. So if that's not equal to null, question mark first name colon, I'll just put FNU for first name unknown. So in English, what this means is if I pass in something into my first name, then it won't be equal to null. So if that's the case, accept it. Otherwise, I passed in something that's blank or whatever, so set the first name to FNU. Okay? All right. We're going to do something similar to that to each one of these that we're working with. Again, get last name is just a getter. So we don't have to do any checks on that. We will have to do a similar type of check to what we just did for the set last name. And I'm going to just grab the code in there and change the stuff from first to last. So this dot last name. Oops. And this will be last name unknown. And okay. Be careful if you do a lot of copying and pasting like this, because it's easy to forget to change something that you should be changing. And that's speaking from experience. All right, this one is going to be just a little bit more complex, for lack of better words. All right, and what I'll want to do here is I'll want to say this dot hours equal if hours is both greater than or equal to min hours, meaning it's greater than or equal to 0, and it's less than or equal to max hours, meaning that it's between 0 and 84, which were the limits that we came up with. So if it happens to be within that limit, right there, all right, if that's the case, then question mark hours, because it's valid, colon, we'll just stick it into we'll give it this will be a default value, so we'll set it equal to 0. All right, so again, in English, what this says is if the number of hours that the person worked is both greater than or equal to the minimum hours, and it's less than or equal to the maximum hours, so if that's the case, I think I need one more paren there. Oops. If that's the case, then it's a valid value. But if that's not the case, then we set it to 0. And we're going to do the same exact thing. In fact, I'll just copy this in right now. We're going to do the same exact thing in here for the rate, except we'll have to change every occurrence of hours to rate. All right. Again, this may seem a little bit boring, but I've always found that, for instance, what I'm doing right here with the commenting, it always helps. I have had situations in the past in my programmatic career when I commented something or didn't comment it, and then later went on to hopefully bigger and better things. And the person that ended up taking over from me, if I didn't comment well, they were quite often at my doorstep quite a bit, saying, why'd you do this, why'd you do that? Well, this is about as many comments as in here as I can have. All right, right now it's looking good. All right, so now I have in all. So I want to double check, because I do have this already created, so let's see if I missed anything. Oh, I wanted to introduce something in here, and it's not mandatory that I do that right now, but I'm going to anyway. And that is, I'm going to put in some Java doc comments, and we'll talk about these in more depth later. All right? But notice I've got here param. It already set that up for me. It knows that I've got these different parameters. And it says add param. So if I want to, I can come in here now and say employee first name. Employee last name. Employee hours worked. Employee hourly rate. And I see that I left this one off, but we'll put it in right now. Employee gross pay. All right, gross is a little bit different of an animal. And what I mean is, we're going to have just a get routine for the gross pay. We're not going to have a set. We're actually going to do the setting inside of this routine. And the reason for that was explained in your textbooks. So this is going to be called get gross. We don't want to have what's referred to as stale data. So this will just return, for now, hours times rate. We'll have to put more stuff in there later, because that's where we're going to end up checking to see whether or not the person has overtime. In fact, we'll put that in just a second. All right, because we're almost done with this particular class. All right. Now, a couple things as I'm looking through my set of notes here that I wanted to do that I didn't do, and we've got these two variables here. So every time we create a new employee, we want to add one to our count. So the first thing we want to do when we come in here is we want to say count plus plus, which means add 1 to our employee counter. So that'll handle this. But we also have tote gross in here. So after we figure out our gross, which is right there, then we also want to add to total gross the gross. Now that's going to get an error right now because this line is an error, so we'll fix this right now. So very similar to what we did before, if hours is less than or equal to max non-OT hours, is that what we called it? I think it's just max non-OT, isn't it? All right. Employee has no overtime pay coming. Pay at straight pay rate. Okay? So again, if the user has worked 40 or less hours, then their gross is just equal to hours times rate. We've seen that one before. Else, employee has some overtime pay coming. Calculate accordingly. Not the greatest comment, but it'll work. So if that's the case, then what we want to say is, as we did earlier, the gross is equal to the rate times max non-OT, which means that's their regular pay. All right, so rate times non-OT plus the hours that they worked minus 40. Could just say 40 there, but that's, we've got a comment for that. Minus max non-OT. Oops. Times rate times the overtime rate. All right. Now, hopefully I didn't make any mistakes, but that should be turning blue, and it did. Now, as I'm looking in here, I see no errors. There's nothing over here that's got an X in it. There's nothing over here that's yellow or red, meaning I've got no errors and no warnings. So I have now created my employee class. So taking this from the top, what we're saying here is that anytime we create a new employee, or a new payroll, I should say, object, okay, that every time I create one, that new payroll person is going to have a first name, a last name, an hours, a rate, and a gross. The hours must be between 0 and 84. The rate must be between 0 and 100. If they work more than 40 hours, they'll have payroll or they'll have overtime coming at a rate of 1.5. In addition, we're going to keep track of both the number of employees we have and the total gross of all of our employees. So our constructor is what gets called, and that means that we're going to have to pass in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 values. And really, I don't think I even need that in here. In fact, I'm going to remove the gross because we're not passing in, I'd be passing in 0 every time, and I don't see the reason to do that. All right? So every time we get a new employee object, we'll add 1 to our count. We'll accept their first name, we'll accept their last name, we'll accept their hours, and we'll accept their rate. But again, if you look in here, we're not doing any checks. So we're not checking, so it's possible we could put bad values in there. So we could say that this is equal to set first name. And we'd pass in F. This would be equal to set last name, and we pass in L. Why am I getting errors? Cannot convert from void to string. Whew. Look at my notes here because I'm trying to do most of this off the top of my head. Well, we could do the same kind of check in here, which I don't like doing, but for now, we'll just do it that way. We'll see how we can fix this and make this look a lot nicer a little bit later. That should remove the errors from there. Oops. So we'll need to copy each one of these in. Hopefully, once we do, that'll remove all the errors that we have in here. How I got that in there, but I did. All right, did that fix everything? And it looks like it did. So right now I'm replicating code, which is something you never should do if you can help it, but we'll fix this in a little bit. We'll fix this in a later chapter. So we create a payroll object. We add 1 to our counter. That's our total number of employees. So I'm going to come in here and add 1 to total employees counter. And we'll also put another comment here that says validate each instance variable before setting accordingly. All right, so we'll do that. Our gets I already explained to you in our sets. So our gets just return the value. Notice there's nothing passed in, and it returns a string if it's last name or first name, and it returns a double if it's hours or if it's rate. And every time we are also checking in here. So if the first name was nothing passed in, we'll set it to FNU. If there was nothing passed in for the last name, we'll set it to LNU. If the hours were out of range, we'll set them to 0. If the rate was out of range, we'll set that to 0. And we're also doing our gross. All right, so we could put a comment in here that says validate last name must not be blank. We're also validating the first name. And the time to put in these comments is when you're writing the code. It's not, please don't say, oh, I'll come back and do it later. You probably won't. So validate hours. And this must be between 0 and 84. Validate the rate must be between 0 and 100, and I put it on the wrong line. Should be here. All right, so I think I've got enough comments right now. So I'm going to save that. And now I'm going to come in and do something I haven't done previously. And that is right mouse click, new, and I want a new class. And I'm going to call this one payroll driver. This is where I'm going to have my main. So I'll have a public static void main, finish, there it is. And in here, I'm going to create some payroll objects. We're going to do this in just a moment. So, as I do, and again, you're not at all mandated to do anything like this, but as I told you before, I've got certain things that I adhere to, whether they're good, bad, or indifferent. put a little comment up on the top here that just says something along the lines of, oops, this is the driver for the Chapter 3 payroll program. It will, 1, 2, 3, 4, I think about 5. It will instantiate, create 5 payroll objects, which will test test the validation in the payroll class and make sure that all works according to plan. Kind of a dumb comment, but it works. Okay? So, I'm going to first come in here and create 5 different payroll objects. But I want to know how many of these I'm going to create. Okay? One thing I should mention too is I guess I should come in here and do a couple more things. Let's import java.text.decimal format so we can make these look pretty. So again, this is to format all dollar values. And here we'll also import javax.swing.J-Option-Pane. And we use that used for input, not input, show message dialog, which we're going to have in here. All right. So the first thing we want to do is we want to instantiate a decimal format object. So I'm going to say decimal formatter. Decimal format, we called it formatter last time, so we'll do the same thing. Equals new decimal format. We'll set it up the same way we did before. $, number, 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 comma, number, 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 comma, number, number, 0.00. All right, so that's our decimal format object. Let me again hit enter a few times to move this up. We'll have to remember to remove all those blank lines at the end. So let's see. Let's come in and create our 5 objects. All right, so it's an object of type payroll. So payroll, we'll make one for each one of my family members. Jeff equals new payroll. Remember, we have to provide a first name and a last name and an hours worked and an hourly rate. All right, so that's the first one. And why is it underlined? String, int, string, int. I don't know if it wants to point 0 in there or not, but we'll put it in anyway. Is that going to fix it? That should be calling this, which is expecting string, double, double. All right? String, double, double. I don't know what the problem with that is, but hopefully we can fix that as we go on. Let's have another payroll. That'll be my wife, Sandy, equals new payroll. And what we'll put here, all valid values, no overtime pay. So Sandy will have overtime pay. So we'll give her 50 hours at $20 an hour. And we'll say here all valid values with OT pay. Boy, that's really bothering me because, of course, we're not going to be able to get that to work the way it is. Remove arguments to match payroll or create constructor payroll string double double. String string double double. All right. I'm going to remove that in just a second, but it's for some reason the system is not recognizing that payroll. Oh, I know what it is. No, it isn't. File. Save all. Because we do have here a constructor. We don't need that. I don't know if that could goof it up, but I don't think so. String, string, double, double. String, string, double, double. String, string, double, double. That should be working. It's not, but it should be working. Again, we'll have to go back and try to fix that in just a couple minutes. Payroll Taylor equal new payroll. And we'll give her bad hours. Invalid hours should be reset to 0. My daughter Mackenzie. And we'll give her an invalid pay rate. All right, remember that the pay rate must be between the hours were 0 and 24, and the pay rate is 0 and 1,000. So let's make it 1,001. So that should be invalid also. And we'll have one named Chloe, and we'll set that to a new payroll. We won't have anything passed in. All right. Now, when I did this, I did not make, repeat, I did not make here a constructor that would handle having nothing passed in. So maybe we need that in there. I didn't think we did. But I'm going to grab everything from here. Copy that in. So this will be constructor 1. Just an arbitrary that I put a 1 in there. And this will be constructor 2. All right. And this one will have nothing passed into it. So we'll call this our no arg constructor. So we're going to pass in here nothing. We'll still add 1 to our count, and the first name we'll set equal to just this FNU, which is first name unknown. Let me see, now I have that. That was wrong. All right. This second one we'll set to last name unknown. The hours for a brand new payroll object we'll set to 0. And the rate will also set equal to 0. All right, so that fixed that. I don't know if that fixed everything, but that fixed everything that we had in here. So we're setting up a no-arc constructor, so if we call something with nothing passed in, that should be the first name, that should be the last name, that should be the hours, and that should be the rate. But that didn't fix this. We have a constructor called payroll with 2 strings and 2 doubles. What I do want to do with each one of these is I want to call get gross. Okay? And I want to call it here also. I really don't have to call it there. In fact, that's probably better off not calling it there. We'll call it from inside of here. So the only one that it recognizes is that one. It doesn't recognize any of these. I have not seen this before. The constructor payroll string double double is undefined. It shouldn't be because it's right there. Just double check to make sure I saved. So it's not recognizing, it's got payroll there, and there's payroll. So that's payroll there. It's saved as payroll, and there's payroll driver. Everything in the class appears to be okay. The problem appears to be not in the class, but it appears to be in the driver. Well, there was our first constructor. I don't see anything I wrote in there that looks wrong, or in here that looks wrong. These all look okay. Let's try Googling it. Java error. What was the exact error? I might not find it either. So, constructor is undefined. Compiler is looking for a matching constructor and the class definition is not finding it. That's the error. You have a constructor defined, but that takes 2 arguments and is not a match. First of all, you should know that one Java file can have only one public class. Well, let's look on this. Okay, well, what it's saying right there for the error is these. I've done all that stuff already. All right, this looks better. Constructor undefined says Eclipse, but it is defined. It should work. It could be that you didn't save your class after you provided a constructor, hence the error. Also, you probably want a static main in your class. Did I not put static in those things? That could be it. Public void static main. Nope, that's all static. I'm going to try something here that sometimes fixes the problem, and that is I'm going to do a project and I'm going to do a clean. I'm going to tell it to clean everything. Clean all projects, that's fine. Which did nothing. String double. It is definitely not finding this. It's as though the code that's right here, this class cannot link to it, which I've never seen before. Payroll. It says in lines 20 and 21, well, that should be able to be fixed with a 0.0 and a 0.0 here. And let's save that. Now that should have gotten rid of these two lines. In there. But it's every case it's saying string double is undefined. And my guess is that somehow it is in here. It should work. Could be because you didn't save your node class after you provide a constructor, hence the error. Also, you probably want a static main. Yeah. It's also missing the constructor at this. That's not the problem. He's not using a constructor like that anywhere. I'm guessing it's an Eclipse parsing problem. Alright, it looked weird as well. They suggest trying to restart Eclipse to see if it'll fix it. I can do that. So let's do a file. Do a save all. Let's do a file, close all. So we're closing everything. All right, you can see we still have our error in there. So I'm going to do a file. I'm going to exit Eclipse. I'm going to come back again, and I'm going to restart Eclipse. All right. Still has the error, so that didn't do a doggone thing. Still have the same exact error. And they look exactly the same. Type Java problem. Well, that's a really big help, isn't it? Let's do this. No, I don't want to go on any further because I was going to comment it out, but I don't want to do that. I want to see what the problem is. Why is Java saying my constructor is undefined even though it is? That's a method, that's a constructor. Okay, did I? This is possible, but I don't think I did. This should never, on payroll.java, that should not have a type. It's our driver with main. What is going on here? Oh, I've got the chapter 4 one up. Oh, I've got the chapter 4 one up. I'm writing the program for chapter 3. Uh-oh. That could be what the problem is. So, might be just all right, let's right mouse click on here, new class, payroll driver. We don't need, yeah, we do need a main. It does not, actually it's not going to matter. We're going to just copy everything in. Well, notice we have no errors. So the problem was I had the right information, I think, but I had it in the wrong file. So in here, where I've got this payroll driver, I want to remove that. So I want to delete that. Yes. All right. I'll go back later and double check and make sure I didn't break the one that I had there. All right. So now I'm getting this and I got no errors, but it's giving me all these because I'm not using this stuff yet. So I've now created my objects. So I'm going to say here, instantiate 5 payroll objects to test all valid/invalid conditions. Okay, so I now created those. So now I want to come in here and I want to do a few things. I'm going to say J option pane dot show message dialog. Payroll object Jeff info. And I'm going to just put this in here as a real huge string, so I'm going to combine it over several lines. So if it looks funky, that's why it looks funky. All right, first name. Now notice that what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say plus Jeff dot get first name. Plus a blank line plus I know it looks a little weird right now, but we're going to say there's first name, there's last name, say here hours worked. Try to line this up a little bit so it looks halfway decent. Hourly rate. We also will need in here gross pay. And we want to format our rate. So we want to say here, formatter dot format Jeff.getRate. This looks really ugly, but I'm just going to leave it like that. And gross pay, which we're again going to say formatter dot format Jeff dot get gross. Oh my goodness. All right. The good news is there are no errors there. Well, there's an error. Oh, I think I need the word null there. Show message dialog. I do need the word null there. So what's my error? Null cannot be resolved to a variable. Okay, option pane, so that's correct. How about only having null have two L's in it? That's helped. Syntax error. It says that I'm missing paren. One more here. All right, that fixes everything. So that'll print all the information for the Jeff object. All right, I could test it now, but what I'm going to do instead is I'm just going to add the other information for the other objects. So let's put a comment here that says display Jeff payroll object information. All right. So now we're going to change all of this. Wish when it copied it, it would copy over the formatting, but it doesn't appear to. So all these here is going to have to be changed to Sandy. And we'll put the message here to display Sandy payroll information. Alright, let's just save it and try to run it and see if we get output, correct output. Exception on line 19 in main. Not a great thing. Well, I'm not sure what that would be an error for, but again, we'll just plot on. So far we've got the Jeff and the Sandy. Now we'll put the Taylor payroll information. All right. We'll copy all of that. And we'll put the Kenzie payroll information. So what we're doing here is we have set up a class that has generic information about all different types of employees. Then we are going, and for each one of those different employees, we are creating an object that tests every one of those particular situations. So we've got a valid employee, we've got it with no overtime, we've got a valid employee with overtime, we've got an invalid employee with a bad rate, we've got an invalid employee with a bad hours, and we have an invalid employee, or a employee with nothing in there. So a null pointer exception, payroll.java line 46. Well, I've got equals null. I wonder if that should be, instead of null, should be just double quote, double quote. I don't see why that would matter, but we'll try that anyway. All right, I'm going to grab my area that's in here and clear it, save everything, and try to run it again. Doesn't look like it's going to go and change it all. No. Null pointer exception means that I'm trying to do something with a value that I have not set, for lack of better words. All right, I'm going to break this up into a 2-lecture situation. So I'm going to stop right now, and then I'm going to see if I can figure out what the problem is and come back and then explain everything in one swoop. So I'll be back to do that shortly.